with Benetti Menswear as we build up to a classic final between Mayo and Tyrone. I'm Shane Stapleton of OurGame, and we've got some great shows lined up as we build up to the final. Today we've got Stephen Rochford and Colm O'Rourke. Just to let you know, if you want to win one of these classic retro GAA jerseys from orgaretro.com, please do like, subscribe and comment with the hashtag Benetti Menswear to be in with a chance of winning one. So, no better place to start than with Stephen Rochford, who of course, you know, you're a Club All-Ireland winning manager, you've won one as a player, took Mayo very, very close to the Holy Grail. Building up to an All-Ireland final, Mayo-Tyrone. What's it like this week building into it?
Yeah, well, it's a bit, thanks to COVID or not, things are sort of a bit muted, you know, a little bit more excitement now with, I suppose, kids getting back to school and whatnot. There's a bit more people out and about and talking about it. But I think restrictions in that have sort of tampered down on the Q&A sessions or those sort of fundraisers that would definitely look to be driving up the typical man on the street vibe. But look, it's getting exciting now. We're into September, and it's great to be having an All-Ireland and be involved in it.
And the monkey is off the back for Mayo in terms of beating Dublin for the first time in 9 years. But they come into the final probably as favourites now, and that's an unusual spot for James Horan. There's a lot going on for him at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, probably the first time, like I can't remember who was favourite, probably in 2012 when they played Donegal. But you're at that. It's not a Kerry and it's not a Dublin that you're facing. And so probably Mayo's form has been really impressive over the last 12 months or so. But certainly this year's championship, we thought going into the All Ireland semi final, I thought their form was better than maybe going into last year's All-Ireland semi-final against Tipperary. So there's there's pressure on everybody, and the manager isn't necessarily not in that line as well. So yeah, but it's a great time. It's a great time, and it's really exciting for James and the management, I'm sure.
Colm, you were there a number of times as a player over the years, and it's not always smooth sailing. Everyone looks at the teams lined out in the day, and it all looks like, right, the 30 players are out there, everything was smooth sailing. But, as you found out in 1991, it's not even, you had pneumonia going into the All-Ireland final. We don't even know what's going on with these players at the moment.
Yeah, it was just unfortunate. It was a great year for us after the 4 games with Dublin, and then about a week before the game I got pneumonia, and it's not the best thing to have coming up to a final, very sick and losing weight, and anyway, it was a nuisance. But like as Stephen knows quite well, there's very few All-Irelands that you come into where everybody's fit, everybody's well, there's no problems. I think when we won the All-Ireland in '87, I think the build up to that All-Ireland was absolutely smooth. I don't think we had an injury problem, we had nothing. There was great excitement about it. Sean Boylan was of the view, which is quite different to most managers now, is that he embraced the crowds, he embraced all the atmosphere of it. We'd train maybe to 5,000 people at a training session. That didn't bother him or upset him at all, because it was the first time Meath had been in All-Ireland in 20 years. So he said, we're going to use the energy from all of this for our benefit, rather than say, listen, shut out all of this and shut out this and shut out that. He was of the view that, in actual fact, that this would be a help to us. And when you win, of course, everything is right.
Yeah, like jumping back to that era, Liam Hayes and yourself, you were actually doing articles for newspapers, the Sunday Tribune and the Sunday Press, which both no longer exist, of course. But what was that like? Because, like, Stephen, you're not going to allow a player to do that these days. But, like, was Sean okay with that? Did you ever kind of step out of line?
No, he would have never mentioned it. Like, I was doing it laterally in 89, 90. Liam, of course, was a professional journalist at that time. I was only a bit player, but it would never have been mentioned. Now, sometimes if you made a comment, some of the lads would say, you'd be better off not saying that, particularly if you said something about some opponent that you might meet further down the line. And it was mentioned to me a couple of times by different players, different things I'd said about them or about their team. But overall, I think most people are intelligent enough that they take these things with a grain of salt.
Obviously, you managed Mayo in All-Ireland finals. Can you imagine Aiden OShea or Lee Keegan doing a column just beforehand?
Do they not?
No. I suppose in some ways, I suppose the social media element of it has sort of really put the frighteners on managers, and that as regards, what is in and out around it. Like Colm was alluding to training in 5,000 probably in Navan or whatever. I can remember back in '96 when Mayo were playing with me, then John Monghan was over it. And the team was travelling around the county for their training sessions, and they used to do every Sunday before their championship game used to be in Crossmolina, and we used to be all over it, and you'd be watching what they were doing and whatnot. And they were great, like it was great excitement to be seeing your heroes of that time. But no, it's a different animal now. Like, I mean, God, can you imagine some fella just taking a bit of a bang and you take him out precautionary out of a session? It'd be like wildfire on social media, and that then becomes a distraction. And believe you me, there's enough out there for managers and the team than to be bringing that on yourself.
Mayo obviously played their All-Ireland semi-final a couple of weeks before Tyrone played theirs. Can you talk to me about, I mean, obviously you're coaching Donegal the past few years, but there's a Mayo man in you, so I'm sure the nerves were there watching it. Towards the end of normal time and towards the end of extra time, there's a bit of keep ball going on for Dublin, which obviously blew up in their faces ultimately, and Mayo were doing it at the end. It was like watching a tightrope being walked here. What was it like for you watching that? Yeah,
it was very nerve-wracking. The Mayo had come sort of with that spurt. I suppose at half time I was quite fearful, because I expected Dublin to do what they've done in probably 95% of their quarter threes in games, to, even if they won it by a point that quarter, we're sort of thinking, it was going to take Mayo to get goals. Now, we did think that Mayo would create goal chances. Now, that didn't materialise either. But I think, when it came to it, Mayo showed almighty desire to get over the line, and Dublin sort of for the first time in the decade probably showed that they were waiting for the line to come to them, which was uncommon for them. But we got there was probably a couple of moments in there. I think Lee Keegan, we got a big turnover off the Niall Scully interception. Lee Keegan kicked that point, and then obviously when Diarmuid O'Connor sticks out his leg and it creates a pass back to Kevin McLaughlin. I don't know where they've been practicing that one from, and Kevin sticks it. You just got this sort of belief in the group that they were, and momentum is big, and I know it's a bit of a cliche, but in that game, they just got the momentum, and they just kept coming, and as I said, Dublin seemed to be looking to get the line to come to them, but Mayo obviously in extra time then got the vital scores.
Colm, you stuck your neck on the block at half time, said it was game over. But you weren't the only one. We all thought it was game over at that point. But
I've been reminded of that by a few Mayo people.
But I don't blame you for saying it, because it'd be worse if you were just saying, look, you never know, and you weren't putting your neck on the block. So I always admire people doing that. But as that game went on, what was it about Mayo, and the fact that they just come back in general year after year after year? There's something in the Mayo spirit.
Absolutely, and Dublin looked mentally jaded, I thought, in the last quarter of that game. Stephen's quite right. They wanted just the thing to be over. They didn't have the same ruthlessness about them, but maybe they hadn't all this sort of ammunition coming from the bench either. But as Stephen was saying, I thought if Dublin got 2 or 3 points in the third quarter, another 2 or 3 points, there was no way Mayo were going to bridge a 7 or 8 point gap in the last quarter, even though Dublin have traditionally, in this year, have been poor in the second half of games. So I thought that a few fellas and the few incidents, I thought Tommy Conroy sort of began to sort of burst into the game and do what he was good at, take on people. And what it showed was Mayo had pace, and pace in the right parts of the field to do damage, like with Neil, Lee Keegan and Paddy Durkin, and then Pádraig O'Hora, man-marking ability too. All of those the bits started to fall into place. And I think even though the ref gave a bad decision in the Owen McLaughlin one, in that he should have called the thing, I think a lot of little decisions in the last quarter went Mayo's way. Like Evan Comerford comes out soloing with the ball. He's a free given against him. Nobody knows what it was for. It wasn't for over carrying the ball. There was none. But Dublin were the architects of their own downfall, and once Mayo scented something happening, they really, really went after them. Like the ball that Diarmuid kept in. Look at last Sunday, same thing happens below at the other goal. Jack Barry keeps it in, basically the same, and it ends up in the net. So all those little small things, and a lot of Mayo players shook off inhibitions and started to play.
Yeah, and then there's the likes of Rob Henley, who, of course, you made that decision to start him in a final a couple of years ago. And one thing I'd always say is you made brave decisions, Aiden OShea fullback. I always loved seeing that. And you know, that one worked out because you won that game. But seeing Rob Henley knock over that level and free, what were your thoughts when you saw that? And he obviously had 2 bites at the cherry. It was brought back to go again. It was great to see.
Well, it was, you know, it was a vital. It was the last kick of the game. It was all on him. And you know, I think it has shown. I think with the whole team, you know, when you're talking about resilience and, you know, that's personal and within the team, you know, like, I'm sure Rob was under no illusions, but that this was the final kick. And he, you know, he was very mentally strong to be able to take that on. And the way the championship is playing between himself and Niall Morgan, they're having a right shootout for the most influential goalkeeper. But, you know, as Colm said, you know, the team was in the second half was a pale, you know, was a different animal than what it was. And again, it's little things. I think, you know, conditions as well. There was a greasy ball, so any bit of a 50-50, Mayo used the term, you lost their inhibition. They just went for it. You know, they didn't care about it. Ball spills, the crowd lift, and I think that was something that I sort of noticed being at the other semi-final, is that the Tyrone spectators, the fans, every little battle that they could win, the supporters were amplifying it, and I think that's going to be an interesting one in a few days' time with the final, the battle between the spectators getting in behind the team as well.
You played it inside forward, obviously, Colm. What would you do with Aiden OShea? Because the last day, you know, he's had some great games for Mayo, but it really didn't work out from the last day, and James Horan pulled him. So what would you do with him for the final?
Oh, drop him.
Would you?
You can say that. You can say that when you're sitting on a stool, and you don't have to take the ramifications for it.
Exactly, it's an easy thing to say. Like, he didn't have a good game, but his record against Dublin and Croke Park has not been good anyway. Maybe against a different team, and his positioning. Like, in actual fact, without sort of joking about it, his first half he could have had 2 points, and which would have really brought him into the game. And instead of that, 2 bad misses. And the Dublin crowd amplified those misses because they get on his back. So playing against Tyrone is a different team, and maybe things could fall differently for him. But the problem, I think, that James Horan is where to play him. Like, you know, you play him outfield, say, for midfield, for the throw-in. Does he move up? His problem has been a lack of speed in Croke Park, and Croke Park sort of magnifies that problem for players. So probably I'd say the best place would be starting him centre forward.
I'm looking at that Tyrone team at the match programme here, and I'm looking at Brian Kennedy and Con Kilpatrick. Wouldn't be the paciest midfield out there, and physically Aiden is going to compete with anybody. I'm thinking maybe midfield might be the right spot and go into full forward when you need to.
Yeah, well, like, I think when you look at the Tyrone midfield there, right, they mightn't have the Brian Fenton type engine, but they can get around the field. Like, Con Kilpatrick can get around the field. I think, you know what. I think sometimes when Mayo have lost games, you know, people automatically look at, you know, what did Aiden do or whatever. I think Aiden had a super 2017 final, to be honest, and probably with the 2 teams going down to 14 men and Dublin having that more space in their defence, sort of, you know, probably didn't help Aiden's final quarter performance, but he had a big game in him on that day. And I think, you know, there's a versatility. He's played a full forward, centre forward, midfield at different times, and that'll be the same again, I'm sure, for the All Ireland final. Will he start? I've absolutely no doubt that he will. But I don't see Mayo changing up their midfield. It'll be Matty Ruane plus either Conor Loftus or Jim O'Connor, I'd imagine. What do you see is the key to this game? We'll talk about Tyrone a little bit more as it goes on, but what is the key to this game for Mayo? Oh, like, I mean, you know, I don't think, you know, Mayo have had a poor first half against Galway and Dublin. I don't think, I think James will be, you know, any manager, but I think he'll be really conscious of that they get out of the blocks early and that they don't allow Tyrone get in the lead, because if Tyrone get in the lead, they sort of dictate the terms, they'll drop their boys in. I think the second thing will be around the team selection. You know, we've got the issues around whether Oshie Mullen will be back. As time goes on, there's more word that maybe Owen McLaughlin is going to be available. If they both were and fit and well, I think they're massive boosts to Mayo, because the strength that Mayo play with is their running game. And I think though, if Mayo only have their running game, I think that's, you know, they need to have something else different. And I think that's where having the 2 younger guys inside, Ryan and Tommy, with Aiden to be able to bounce off that at times, will just, you know, pros, sort of new questions for Brian Dooher and Fergal Logan to consider with an Oisin Mullen and Owen McLaughlin. And then the final thing is, is the matchups. And I think, as maybe a bit of a football nerd or whatever, you're sort of always inclined to sort of say, where will they get there? And at the moment, Tyrone have been seen to have the nudge on all their opponents so far, getting their matchups right. So, and that'll be a critical part, because both teams have 3 or 4 really crucial players, and where they position those and how the other team looks to negate it will also play a major factor.
And Colm, Tyrone then, I mean, very impressive to beat Kerry the way they did, and their season has obviously been blighted by different issues, and it's the first season for Fergal Logan and Brian Dooher. How impressed have you been by them, and what areas?
Well, I've been very impressed by their attitude, and Kerry were sort of making excuses about this, that and the other. And I always sort of feel, you do your talking on the pitch, and once the game was fixed, as far as I was concerned, there should never have been a mention of a COVID thing about it, even on television. The game was on, and anyone that didn't think that Tyrone were going to come like hungry wolves to this game, have been living in cuckoo land for 20 years. That is their game. But the passion they brought to it is even greater. I was talking to Tomas O'Shea, and Tomas on Sunday night, and he said they often watched Tyrone in their games and they saw this passion, they thought they were ready for it. But when Tyrone came to them, it seemed to go up a notch, and it was even hungry. And you could see it from all the blocks they made last Sunday. And we were talking earlier about the laxity in Kerry players defending the crucial goal chances that Tyrone got. But if you'd flip that around, the hunger Tyrone players had in their defensive line to get in blocks in similar type of dangerous situation. And that, I think, showed the difference between the teams. The other thing about it is I definitely think Tyrone are playing with more sort of abandon within a good organised system, a bit more enthusiasm, a bit of freshness about their player, and they're engaging the opposition higher up the pitch. They're not all retreating back inside their 45 lead. A lot of the good tackles Tyrone put in on Kerry players were in the middle third of the pitch, turned them over 35 times, which is sort of unheard of for a team. So that hunger they're going to bring, that bravery on the ball, and they're all very comfortable individual footballers, and if they can afford to leave Canavan and McShane in the subs and bring them on with 15-20 minutes to go, that is a crucial aspect to their game.
Conor McKenna joined the team last year, but of course this is his first full season, if you can call this a full season. He's a guy you've met away from the field as well. He's a good character.
Yeah, and I think he's brought a little bit. He's a sort of a good-humoured, happy-go-lucky sort of fella, and oftentimes you talk about Tyrone and you see that they're sort of very focused and mentally rigid and, humourless to an extent. And I think that wouldn't be the case, certainly not with McKenna anyway, and I'd say he's brought a sort of happy-go-lucky. But they look a very happy camp, and they seem to like Fergal Logan and Brian Dooher a lot, which is not surprising because of their record in Tyrone football. So I'd say a lot of the pieces have just fitted into place very well for them.
I think with both teams, it was one thing that stood out to me, having sort of reflecting on both finals, or both semi-finals, is that there's a lot of spirit in the team. There's a lot of belief, I think, in what they're doing. I think in every little turnover or battle, you could see the Tyrone lads, really, driving it on and sort of brings you back to the Conor Gormley and the Ricey McManaman days of letting you know that they've just won that personal battle. But I also saw that in Mayo in the semi-final. The spirit they had, we've alluded to Jimmy O'Connor putting a foot out for 99% of people would say let it go, but no, they went for it, and I think they fought for more ball. And the Hessian came on, young lad, only just in the squad, played his first senior game only back in May, and these guys are all contributing. There looks to be really good spirit within both camps.
And then what tactically, the kickouts the last day, Kerry basically were allowed to have all of the kickouts by Tyrone, and Kerry pushed up on Tyrone and turned them over a lot. So does that offer an opportunity to Mayo if they do the same thing?
I think, Tyrone sort of baffled a lot of people because they tore up the what has become the script around you have to do a job on the opposition's kickouts. Like Kerry did a job on theirs and really did do a job on it. But I think part of that as well was that, out of the National League game, a number of the goals that Kerry scored against Tyrone came off the kick out, going short, and probably not being as cohesive around their kick out as they're not. But Niall Morgan was taking no chances the last day. If he couldn't get it 100% to a defender, it was gone long. They had their bodies in defensive position in there. I don't know, will that quite be the same against Mayo? I think Mayo don't push up as aggressively. I mean, you know, at the game the last day, Shane Ryan and Thomas Sullivan were the nearest the Kerry goal, and they were standing on their 45. So they had all 15 players pushed in, 5 inside the 45 and a bank of 8 then in the middle. And that's not, Mayo haven't done that, you know, where they have seen something in that they'll take, maybe. But Mayo don't have a big midfield, and they'll be conscious also of Niall Morgan's ability to be able to go along and take out maybe Mayo's high press element. So there will be, it'll be interesting to see how they mix up. And Robbie can do something similar, like he can go long or he can go short. So it'll be fascinating, but I don't think it'll be a case that you'll see Tyrone handing all the kickouts to them. I think they'll compete a lot more, and Mayo will certainly look to press, but I don't think they'll push up in the same aggressive manner that Kerry did.
And when people say, you know, go for broke, and you even talked about Mayo in the second half against Dublin, that they were going for it. When you talk about the kickouts, I mean, people say that maybe you can't press up for every single kickout over 70 minutes. You get, you know, worn down eventually by that, or, you know, Morgan can kick at 68 metres as we saw for his free, so he'll go over the top. Is it as simple as that you can't just you have to pick and choose your moments to press up on the likes of Tyrone? Because they do look weak that way.
Yeah, well, it's I suppose it all depends on what you're planning. Kerry they pushed it up, but again, I think it was a case of Niall Morgan wasn't rushing anything. Maybe that was, like, you know, in fairness to Tyrone, you just don't know. Maybe their idea was, listen, we're going to slow things down here. Maybe they were conscious of the COVID element, that they couldn't keep at a high pace. Whatever it is, it definitely worked for them in the long run. But there's definitely times you can do it. You can do it on set plays, you know, when the ball is going to be dead. But with Kerry, they pushed everybody forward, so it was a lot more cohesive. Fellas weren't wondering, well, should I be here or should I be there? Everyone just pushed forward. And that's nearly a bit easier when everybody is doing it, more than one or two just pushing it. So
the difference, of course, is, say, between Cluxton and other goalies. By the time the ball will go over the bar, Cluxton will be ready to kick it out. And it's often very difficult for a team to get organised unless it's a free in. Say it's a free in, and everybody can say, and the free taker delays the 5 seconds and says, right, is everybody in their place? And then kicks the ball over the bar, say an easy free. And everyone can get, but like, again, if you're playing Dublin and the ball goes wide, dribbles out wide, Cluxton has the ball gone to somebody. But Morgan is not, as you say, he's not going to do that
as quickly, no.
And they have been trying it several times. It didn't work now against Kerry very much. The high kick and somebody to go up and flick it on, and you could see that Tyrone were trying that. It's an old Donegal one. Yeah. You were involved in Michael Murphy coming out and flicking on for Ryan McHugh and it didn't work. It worked against Donegal a couple of times.
Yeah, well, I think what I think maybe the first 4 kickouts against Kerry the last day, definitely up to the water break anyway, all their long kickouts were won by Kerry. And then they actually looked to isolate Brian Kennedy a bit out in the wings, and they actually, off Mike Breen, and they got him on those. They won actually all of those kickouts in that. But again, that didn't seem to be as much of a pattern again in the second half. So I think, look, as Colm has also made the point, your ability to push up is dictated a lot by how quick the opposition get the restart away. So if Tyrone look to up the pace on it, that'll become a little bit more difficult for Mayo. But if Niall Morgan is operating at the same pace, just letting them get their structure right, and maybe that's a part to do with them not having big men out the field, that they're going to just try and steady it up a bit.
And it will depend too on, like, if it's the second half of the game and Mayo are 3 or 4 points up, Morgan won't be hanging about. So there's a whole range of factors involved.
Does Matty Donnelly come out to the middle third? Then, you know, Conor McKenna could be hit. So there's in fairness to Tyrone, no more than if Mayo look to bring Aiden OShea, there'll be options, and you can see it maybe being changed up for certain periods of the game as well.
Just some players who really stood up for Tyrone that semi-final. I think everyone was talking about Conor Myler and the job that he did in Paddy Clifford. Kieran McGeary was talked about, Paddy Hampsey. Like, they have some serious leaders.
Yeah, I was really impressed with Conor Myler. Like, he was a fella that I didn't rate that particularly highly before the game. In fact, I often wondered what his particular role, but they have found a role now in a specific man-marking job for him. And Hampsey, McNamee, even though he was playing on Quicksilver, he still was sticking at it. Like, they're very single-minded, I think, the Tyrone players, in that their application to the job is 100%. And Matty Donnelly didn't have a great first half. He made several mistakes, and yet they still keep sort of a relentlessness about them. And he did a lot of very good things in the second half and in extra time. And Peter Hart again wasn't in the game, but then he makes a brilliant block. Michael O'Neill was not in the game much. He makes blocks. So a lot of the bit players, if you could call them that, and it might be sound a bit insulting, but fellas are willing to do their job, a specific job, and there's very little ego about them. They don't seem to need any great individual glory. They're willing to do the dirty work for the greater good of the team.
And do you have to juggle egos as a manager? I'm sure you're not going to name who has an ego, but you do have to juggle that stuff.
Oh, like, I mean, you know, with any team, you know, different personalities, you know, are in there. And I think, you know, the idea in man management is you want players going out in the field that are going to express themselves as well, but you want it done within the team structure as well. So you definitely don't want to become robots out there. So I think guys playing with a bit of personality is always good, but not allowing that take over from what the team is about. And just coming back onto it, and it's interesting that Colm has said there about Conor Myler, and I think Conor won a Sigerson maybe back in about 2018 or whatever, and he was coming on the scene that around that time. And we played Tyrone. I was involved with Mayo down in Castlebar in a National League game, and we played Kildare the week before, and we'd really done really well against Kildare. Kevin McLaughlin had a really super game, and they put Conor Myler on him, and it was the first day I saw Conor Myler being totally selfless in what he does, right? Absolutely selfless. And it's a great characteristic within a team when you've got those guys that are going to be like that. It's Matty Donnelly is going to do certain things for you, and Darren McCurry is going to do it, and Ronan McNamee, and then that brings all the jigsaw together. But Conor Myler, I think he's an absolutely key player for Tyrone as they go into the final. And
having been involved in the Ulster Championship again this year directly against Tyrone, who were the players that you tried to stop? Now, obviously the red card.
I think it's about 26 now there.
Now, of course, the Michael Murphy getting sent off kind of changed everything. But like, who were the players you were looking to shut down? And in the course of the second half, Matty Donnelly really became an influence.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, like, you know, when you've got an extra man in those heat, in the heat of that day in Brewster Park, when the team goes, and I think actually that was probably the first day of us seeing what Tyrone now developed through the Ulster final and the last days. They're a bit more of a hybrid of what, you know, Gavin Devlin and Mickey Hart are doing. So they have a good defensive structure. They're hitting you a little bit more on the counter attack while still engaging you a bit further up the field. They're not playing with 3 or 4 guys up the field. McCurry typically stays up there, maybe Matty Donnelly coming off it. But look, you know that they're going to try and target a couple of your guys. But again, it's the guys that you've always got. Peter Hart, right? Matty Donnelly, Darren McCurry. They were typically the guys that had gone well against Cavan and the guys that you need to shut down. But now you've got Kieran McGeary coming into a great bit of form. He had a really good game against Donegal that day. He scored maybe 3 points that day. Niall Sludden scored 2. I know he didn't score the last day, but he's given them that energy of being able to get back into the half-back line, and he's got great pace carrying that ball forward. So they have a number of names that you target, but you know, Michael O'Neill and Hampsey and McNamee and Michael McKiernan as well. You know, they've got a lot of guys that are willing to put the shoulder to the wheel as well.
Yeah, I suppose it's here, and every team that wins in All Ireland has unsung heroes, but they are often the most important players of all because they do the specific jobs which allows the other fellas to sort of really express themselves and become the great players. But like on the team I played, like we had Terry Ferguson and Kevin Foley, fellas like that, who went out in every game, did a man marking job, didn't care less if they handled the ball 3 times or twice or never handled it, but they were quite happy. They did their job, and they would sort of say, right, you get on with yours. We'll look after certain fellas, and it's up to everybody else then, the high profile fellas, to get on with their job. But you can't do without them. You can't have a team of just pure footballers.
They're the fellas that you typically would refer to as in, if you're in the trenches, they'd be the first fellas you pull in with you, you know. And you know, both teams definitely have them. You alluded to Pádraig O'Hora. For me, he's been been outstanding what he has done. 28 years of age, and he's now putting it on. You talk about development squads and 20-year-olds and 21-year-olds, and they're coming. This guy is 28, mature, and you can see it in the way he talks and the way he plays. He's really relishing those opportunities and really happy to roll up the sleeves.
It's probably no surprise that the two of these teams are in All-Ireland. Like, obviously we talked about the monkey off the back with Dublin. With Tyrone, it was they hadn't beaten Kerry, Dublin or Mayo since 2008. But these teams won All-Ireland titles at under 21 level in 2015 and 2016. So there is quality throughout their teams.
Yeah, and I know that there's as much talk about Mayo being in All-Irelands, but a lot of that Tyrone team were in the 2018 All-Ireland final as well, so and beaten in the 2019 semi-final. So it's not that Tyrone don't have experience as well as Mayo. So yeah, like I think for I wouldn't be as sure around how many of the Tyrone lads were on that under 21 team, but I think there's about 6 of the Mayo starting team: Michael Plunkett, Stephen Cohen, Jermut, Conor Loftus, James Carr came off the bench. Those guys all started that All-Ireland final back in 2016 for the under-21. So yeah, they're coming and they're at a good age now, 5 years on. So yeah, I think they're obviously the new fulcrum of that team as such.
Are you surprised that Mayo have been able to transition? 6 players retired. They lost an All-Ireland final last year. Are you surprised to see them back this quickly?
Very much so. I thought that there was a sort of a golden era of Mayo football went out there with Keith Higgins and Ep1 OShea and Colm Boyle and all these. They were truly great. I hope
you're not retiring Colm Boyle. We're hoping to see him in the final.
Well, he's gone from the first 15, I suppose. Yeah, but like all these fellas, they're great-hearted players, and Tom Parsons, all these sort of fellas who were genuinely great players. And like, there's nobody who wouldn't have liked to see those fellas winning in All-Ireland. I tend not to use the word deserve because, that's, I don't know whether you ever deserve anything out of football. But then to come along with a whole bunch of new players like Oisin Mullen and Owen McLaughlin, and I can't see how would Owen McLaughlin miss the final. Sure, all he got was a double jaw break. Sure, how would that keep...
Common stuff in the meat training session probably in the 90s.
How would that keep anybody out of an All-Ireland final? Like, his jaw can heal any time between now and next March. And the worst thing that could happen to him is that he'd break it again. So, why wouldn't he play?
And they brought in gum shields.
Yeah, Hessian and... I like Tommy Conroy and Ryan Odonnell, and Kevin McLaughlin has been a great player for Mayo. So, there's a whole bunch of new fellas, but there's still that sort of the old heads there as well. There's a nice mix.
I think and I was watching the game when they played Clare in the National League, and when Killian went down injured, I thought it was he did his calf or his ankle or something like that, and then to find out that it was something as serious as the Achilles. I think Killian not having been there has probably led a lot of people to think that Mayo weren't going to be in the position that they're in now, and I think it's fair. He's been such a talisman for the team over the last decade, frees and from play. So, but what it has allowed now, it has allowed for the Ryans, the Tommy Conroys, probably a little bit before people would thought of, to play with that sort of a little bit of responsibility, without expectation, and they've been allowed and they have prospered, and the team has sort of spread the load of what Killian maybe had carried in the past.
When Killian O'Connor went down, I was thinking this would be like Kerry in 2014 winning the All-Ireland without Gooch, and this is kind of the way it's panning out. It is going to be a big job for Ryan O'Donoghue, who we presume will be taking the frees.
Yeah, and he wouldn't be as good a free taker as Killian. He wouldn't have the same range, but I suppose within 40 metres he's very accurate, but he's not going to be kicking 45s over the bar and stuff like that, which is a bit of a loss, because I suppose for Killian O'Connor you were chalking down 6, 7, 8 points for every game. And I suppose the concern that I would have about Mayo is if you have good conditions, you need to score 116, 117, 118. That's your target, isn't it, to win the All-Ireland? Yeah, and to get to over 20 points. And looking at the first half against Dublin, you would say, where are scores going to come from? And Mayo won a low-scoring game against Dublin. I think they'll probably need to win a relatively low-scoring final, because I don't know whether they have 118 in them.
Yeah, but like I'd say that on the flip side of that as well is that like Tyrone give away a lot of frees. You know, I think it counted up on there was 9-10 frees that they gave away to Kerry. Now you're talking about a Sean O'Shea who maybe along with Dean Rock, with Killian not playing, is possibly the best, one of the best free takers certainly in the country. But also in that, like up to 50 minutes, 55 minutes in the game, only one Tyrone forward had scored in Conor McKenna, you know, from play. Yes. You know, Matty Donnelly had got a mark. But so in some ways, will it be the battle of the defences, or will it be who's going to take the grasp of it up front? Will it be a McCurry, or will it be a Conroy? Will it be a McKenna, or will it be a Ryan Odonnell? You know?
But I suppose Tyrone are the one county who don't rely on forwards. No. Like their scores in every game come from all over the place, and they have license to attack. Like McKiernan scores in most games, and like by half time the full back line had all scored. Like 5 of the 7 points had come from the goalie and the full back line, and then they had the goal from McKenna. But like it's an amazing thing, they have this ability to transition from defence to attack, and it just shows the quality of the players that they have, like that the full back line are not afraid to shoot and are obviously encouraged to do so.
And in Mayo, you know, if McLaughlin or Oisin Mullen and McLaughlin are available, Paddy Durkin, Lee Keegan, Oisin, they obviously offer a similar, and that's where you're at this point out, it's a bit of cat and mouse, you know. Certainly going to be dictated by what team Mayo can put on the field, because I think, you know, you'd be pretty sure what that Tyrone are going to what Tyrone will have. There may be a change here or there, but I think you'd be pretty sure around what 14 of their players will be.
Is your emotional investment going into these games just massive? Because the link you have, you know, you name some of the players there. I'm sure Lee Keegan, Aiden OShea, all these players you've been in the trenches with.
Yeah, well, I'm really looking forward to it. I'm you know, all going well. Whoever is in charge of the tickets will be able to look after myself and my son to get going. And that'll be my first All Ireland final with him, who's now gone mad into it at the age he is. So you know, I'm having been sort of in there and knowing what sort of is going on within a camp going into an All Ireland final. There's an element of it now being able to enjoy it back out, and obviously with supporters being there, it's a week in which I'm really looking looking forward to it, and as it ramps up. But you know, as Colm was alluding to it earlier in the season, you know, Mayo and All Ireland final, is it going to be the year? I think somebody said to me that it was in Old Moors that it was going to be Limerick and Mayo this year, so we're keeping the fingers crossed.
So Colm, it's two pretty evenly matched teams here, you know, and Dublin aren't in the final for the first time in a long time. So excitement is through the roof. Which way are you starting to lean?
Well, I hope it's not a case of Mayo finding somebody else to beat them in a final after so many close shaves. I think everybody in the world, even the Taliban, I think, are shouting for Mayo this time. So I definitely would like to see Mayo winning the All-Ireland, but my head is saying that Tyrone are such a ruthless crew, and that they now are in pole position to win.
Yeah, and is there any particular reason?
I just think that you know, they bring this sort of mindset to the game that we saw against Kerry. Like if Mayo were playing Kerry, I think Mayo would have a better chance, because I think there was frailties in the Mayo side. So in some respects, if Mayo or Kerry had to get over the line, I would have thought Mayo would beat Kerry. But Mayo don't have a good record against northern teams. They're not afraid of northern teams. They don't seem to put any great fear in them. But I think Mayo people will be very happy if I say Tyrone.
Stephen, what are you thinking?
I genuinely believe Mayo will win it. I think they've, as I was saying earlier, I think there's great spirit in them. There's obviously great belief there as well. I think the two teams are very evenly matched, you know. But I think that and I think it's, you know, Mayo probably need to come out of the blocks early, try and get a bit of a distance, like just a couple of points, and try and unnerve Tyrone and try and see if they can change them up. But no, you know, confident without being in any way sort of cocky or arrogant, that I think there's a good blend within that team of that experience and that youth and pace that they can get us over the line.
I think it'll be war anyway, for sure.
Absolutely, that's what we want.
You know?
Okay, well, my thanks to Colm and Stephen. That's it for tonight's episode of the All-Ireland Series live with Benetti Menswear. We'll be back with another great show at 8 p.m. tomorrow night, so keep an eye out for that. A reminder, if you do want to win one of these orgaretro.com jerseys, please enter, comment, like, subscribe, and use the hashtag Benetti Menswear. Thanks very much.